Hello, everyone. Dr. Nikhil Verma here with another edition of Things I Didn't Learn in Med School. Today, I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for the past few months and kind of timely as well because I just finished the Netflix docuseries Painkiller, which is about Purdue Pharma and the rise of Oxycontin and how it became such a popular medication used and the high potentiation of abuse that came after that. Um, if you guys haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. I think it gives a lot of insight. Um, there's a lot of pushback from the chronic pain patients out there and advocacy for chronic pain because it negatively displays what pain patients go through. Um, Coming from the other side of the lens, I mean, we see it as healthcare workers. We see it from our point of view, and I think that's what's important for us to see where the pitfalls were, and not blaming the patients and not blaming the um, even the doctors or the staff people that were recommending and prescribing these medications. Basically, we were um, tricked into believing this medication was this home run medication without any side effects and with low risk abuse. In fact, the article that Purdue Pharma used to push this on doctors' offices, they had quoted a study. And I say this with emphasis because it wasn't actually a study, it was more of a letter to the editor. But yeah, that letter to the editor stated that less than 1% of chronic pain patients will get addicted to this medication. And it was, again, a letter to the editor in the New England Journal of Medicine, tucked away, and it wasn't supposed to be a comment, and even a comment to be taken like that. And even the authors of the article have come out publicly and said that that wasn't the goal of that statement, and it's not right that Purdue Pharma went with it. Um, so yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of background information about this. Not only have I also watched Dope Sick this year, I've also read the book Empire of Pain, which also talks about the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma. But even before that, I remember backtracking even in, this must have been in college or undergrad or early med school where I started reading about opioids, and I had some sort of recognition of Purdue Pharma and this groundbreaking drug, and I thought it was amazing. Like, cool, it's people are going to be out of pain, and didn't think anything of it until fast forward to residency when we started getting more and more reports of addiction um, and that kind of stuff. Um, and that's kind of around my med school residencies when the tide had turned and people stopped prescribing as much. There were still pain clinics, there were still places to go, but it was really used more in inpatient, and not a lot of people outpatient were prescribing it, at least around where I was. But that didn't mean that it wasn't still a problem. And then when I was in residency as well, I remember reading a Times Magazine article about this topic, about Purdue Pharma, about the Sackler family, and that was really where like all red flags went up for me. Is like, this is actually a lot more dangerous than we thought. And as we continue down this pathway, we do know worse and worse outcomes with opioids. And the unfortunate part is, I know that Painkiller was dramatized for effects, but the some of the actions that some of the symptoms that the patients were kind of coming in with um, in that show was, again, obviously dramatized, but it's what I've seen in my clinic, in myself. I was working at a pain clinic, um, and knowing when those patients are like yelling at you and getting aggressive, and um, understandably they're in pain and you're there to help them out, but it just it's not a good feeling. And it's kind of like, are there other options? Should there be other options? and hopefully we'll continue to find other options. And I think there's a new medication coming out, going through, I think, the phase 3 trials right now that is supposed to work on a different pathway of pains, and hopefully that will be another solution to the problem that we're facing. But the show, the docuseries, if you call it, whatever you want to call it, it was interesting to see the other side of things. This wasn't really about the perspective of the patients, even though I think a lot of people think it was. I think what it was important is you really saw how the Sackler family operated and thought, and the behind the scenes decision making. And you also saw how the pharmaceutical company and Purdue Pharma and industry has a huge influence on what physicians do and say, and how they are able to go out and promote their products. So let's put everything in a little timeline. 1996 was when Oxycontin first got patented, and they were able to use it for almost all types of pain almost immediately. Purdue Pharma thought about this great marketing strategy where they would go out and increase the dosage per provider. So they were giving bonuses to their sales rep for their providers to give more and more medication by the milligram. And then they came up with this 160 milligram, which, if anyone knows, is an absolutely massive dose, and it could actually, kill you, get you addicted, and kill you if you go through withdrawals and something like that, or overdose. Both have some dire consequences. And yeah, you can't necessarily die off of the withdrawals from the opioids, but the point's taken where it can cause a lot of problems, right? Anyway, so these pharmaceutical companies were largely unregulated on how they were allowed to advertise to physicians and all this, that, and the other. So what happened is, Purdue Pharma or other pharmaceutical would pay thousands and thousands of dollars for their pharmaceutical reps to take their doctor out to, a Super Bowl game, or to a golfing outing, or, pay for these really fancy dinners and bring them gifts. And when we're talking gifts, we're talking like, not just like cup of coffee. We're talking, $1,000 gifts of bracelets and watches and this kind of stuff. And I think you might be sitting there saying this never happened, or where's the evidence? Unfortunately, I saw this kind of firsthand. No one in my family is a physician, but we have a lot of family friends that are physicians, and some of the stuff that they would come back and say, so-and-so rep brought this for me, it would just blow your mind. And that would push the physician to practice medicine that's not medicine that they're practicing. They're taking the word of the rep and going with it. And the reps were very much want to push their products, and they want to treat their best customers and treat them well. And that's just kind of how the industry worked. And again, this was highly unregulated up until about 2009, 2010. The government passed the Physician Sunshine Act, which really increased the transparency of what physicians were getting paid and for what. And it started limiting, you can't take them out to sporting events, you can't buy them nice things. Essentially, all it came back to is, the industry or pharmaceuticals are allowed to purchase meals for educational purposes for staff members, and all that has to be recorded. The MPI numbers are recorded, all that kind of stuff. And this is submitted quarterly, potentially yearly, I forget which one, to the government, and they have a track record of it. And, this kind of really changed the game of how people could push products. Now, physicians could still go on speaking gigs for these companies and get paid for their time and services, and pay for airfare and pay for hotel room and that kind of stuff, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But that's kind of where the Sunshine Act really started taking place, and for the better or for worse in some people's opinion. But they had to change their marketing. So now that's when they started increasing the amount of ads in the clinic, popping up these posters and, you know, pamphlets and all that kind of stuff. Um, I get this question all the time of, hey, do you want this promotional poster on your wall? Do you want this? Do you want that? And I say, no, I don't want my walls. As you can see, my walls are fairly bare. I have some of my diplomas in some of my office rooms. I have calendars, as you see back there, a little bit of artwork, but nothing crazy. Um, I don't want my clinic, my office, to look like a walking advertisement. Um, I don't think that's fair for the patient. I don't think that's fair for me. I don't think it's fair for anyone involved. The only person it's fair for is the company, because now you have a patient asking, "Hey, is that the right procedure for me?" Which is a fine question to ask, but you have to take the clinical judgment into play, and I think that's what's most important. And I say this quite often: is I'm not going to let industry, I'm not going to let someone that's not a physician dictate how I practice and operate my practice and how I help my patients. Um, due to the Sunshine Act, fast forward, I think, to 2020, they actually have a website called openpayment.gov where you can go search any physician out there, as long as you know their name and their state that they're practicing, and they can, and their specialty. You can kind of access what they've been paid by companies. And, I encourage you to go check that out, because sometimes these gurus or these thought leaders that you are following or that I'm following, they might not end up being who you think they are. Um, I encourage you to go look at mine. I'm very thankful and grateful for the companies over the past year that have past years, I guess, have taken me to dinner and give me opportunities to speak at their conferences, and um, giving me other opportunities, even just quick educational or physician relations, or meeting other physicians in the area. These are all beneficial things, the purpose of education, but also in the purpose of helping um, grow their company. Now, I always take it with the grain of salt. I don't take it for advantage. I do try to abide by, if it's the right patient, is the right therapy for this right patient at the right time. And that's something I try to do for all my patients, and not just throw procedure after procedure, medication after medication for someone. Um, so that's a big thing. And it's funny because that brings up the story. Like, I remember back at one point in my career, not in Ohio, I was out to dinner with a company, and there was kind of a physician meetup. And I was being modest, like, I'll just take this, salad, steak, whatever. But I remember this neurosurgeon, he would, I think he must have ordered 5 to 7 appetizers and then 2 meals. And then at the end of it all, he didn't eat it all, obviously, but he ended up ordering another appetizer and another meal to take home to his wife and kids. So he kind of boxed it all up and took it home. I'm like, that's the absolute worst that like kind of thing you can do, because you're taking advantage of the situation here and treating this company like they owe you something. And I don't know. I don't know if that's a sense of entitlement or if that's just kind of how he operates, but it just rubbed me the wrong way. Um, you know, on the other end of the spectrum, though, there are physicians out there that are paid appropriately for what they do. One of my colleagues, one of whom I respect very deeply, I looked at his, and he talks for several companies. He goes to several events. He has some positions, and just kind of looked at his just out of curiosity. And I was actually surprised that I'm like, I would have guessed he got paid more for as busy as he is and all he does. But I think it's still adequate. I mean, I don't think he's drowned out by judgment because of the industry. I don't think that he's pushing products he doesn't believe, or he's not just doing it for the money, which I probably gained a little bit more respect in that aspect for him. But then you look at the other end of the spectrum, and I see people that I once did respect or once had some respect for, and looked at their payments, and we're talking $300,000 to $500,000 a year in just airfare and speaking gigs and dinners and all that kind of stuff. All the stuff that's legal under the Sunshine Act now. Um, and here we have, I know a lot of my colleagues who aren't even making $300,000 a year working. So these other physicians, they still have full-time jobs. They're still getting paid a salary or RVUs. So it's and they're productive, and they have lots of patients. So these people are clearing 700,000, 800,000, 100,000, or $1 million a year because of all this. And if you look at some of the literature, there's sometimes published, the amount of bias in these kind of research or who has the highest bias, and not surprisingly, the people that were paid the most had the highest bias in those studies, and it makes sense. So I always, warn the residents, the fellows, med students, whoever else is out there, is maybe time to be a little bit weary of these people you're following and you want to idolize. If that's the thing you want to do, I think that's a great way to supplement income. I think it's something that I looking forward to talking for companies and teaching and all this stuff. But I don't know if it's the right thing to do if you're pushing things that might not be the benefit. And I think that's what Painkiller actually showed me the biggest is, no one was questioning those doctors. They had these great selling points, and they used that study from New England Journal of Medicine. They had these great rebuttals for anything that came up, and like, it's the patient's fault. We can't help all addicts. This medication isn't addictive if taken how the doctor prescribes it. All these crazy ways to get around it for their reps to give more and more medication. But the aftermath is obviously something that we've been having to deal with for many, many years now, and we're still dealing with it. And this is actually so interesting to me that I even had a colleague who works in the industry, and they had messaged me after they had started Painkiller, and they said, this makes me feel so gross about myself, not really about myself, but about my industry. And, some people, it just looks like they're all about the money. And I said, yeah, and it still goes on. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying that I know better or anything, but I do see what's going on, and I think it's going to be a massive problem in the future. And I still think it's a problem now. It's going to be a massive problem in the future if we don't hold ourselves accountable, hold our industry reps accountable, hold other physicians and other healthcare workers accountable, because otherwise everyone's just going to say what they want, and they're going to produce these studies and publish these studies just to show that their product works. And the kicker is these people don't understand other technologies. So they only understand theirs. They understand it well. They know their studies really well. They say, yeah, I read my competitor studies. Sure, you read your competitor studies, and at that point you're being hypercritical for just to be hypercritical, because you don't want other physicians to use that technology. But ultimately, that's not how any of it works. We as a community need to actually boil down and look at the data and see what's most important, see what's going on. And then until we get there, it's still going to be a problem, but hopefully we'll be able to kind of influence in better ways and get the right technology out there and get the right procedures for the right patient at the right time. I think all this will really help push our field and push medicine in the right direction and stop some of this distrust that individuals have in the medical system as we see it now. So, well, hopefully you guys found this interesting and insightful. If you have any comments, questions, please drop them below. Please subscribe, like this video, and share it with your friends. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to message me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or on YouTube, and talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.